Welcome to PWN Milan, everyone. Welcome to the first event of 2022. As I mentioned, I see many members connected, but also many new faces, many new names, I have to say. So I will just give you a brief introduction of who is PWN Milan. First of all, I'm Ginny Dupasquier, PWN Milan president, and I'm happy to introduce you to our association. We are an association of women working on accelerating gender balanced leadership in business and society. We are part of a wider federation of city network working in many countries in Europe and in the world with the same mission. What are our main objectives? We aim at accelerating the change and promoting and foster gender balance as a competitive advantage for business, international networking and professional development opportunities for women to accelerate leadership and growth, and that has always been our main purpose so far, but also we aim to inspire younger generation to be competent on these topics, to become the open-minded and inclusive leaders of tomorrow. Last but not least, we are working on men's engagement to involve them to be allies in the process and to challenge rules and outdated cultural assumptions and barriers. So we really want to make this journey all together with many stakeholders. If you would like to participate to PWN Milan activities, I give you a brief overview on what we do. So every month, once a month, we organize networking aperitivo with workshops on soft skills, and that is a wonderful occasion to work on your professional development and also to meet new people. We have a number of professional development programs, the very well-known mentoring and reverse mentoring programs that will kick off the new edition next March, and also other team coaching programs targeting women, but also, as I said, younger generation, and most recently, men. We also offer webinars like this one on very interesting topic, and other type of events, roundtable and panel discussion on topics that are particularly interesting for our community. So without further ado, I will now give the digital stage to my colleague Elena Colombo, PWN Milan Events Director, who will introduce you this evening and our amazing speaker tonight. Thank you. Elena, to you.
Thank you very much, Ginny. And I would like to give you a warm welcome also from my side to the very first event of the new year in PWN Milan. We're very honored to begin this year, this 2022, with a testimony of a great professional and human caliber. Tonight, we have the opportunity to meet live Sarah Gay Forden, internationally renowned journalist and author of the book, The House of Gucci, being 10 weeks now in the New York bestseller list for nonfiction. That's really amazing, I believe. As you all may know, the book is also the base for the blockbuster Ridley Scott film, which is starring Lady Gaga and Adam Driver, and has been released just before Christmas in Italy. To lead this conversation with Sarah, we will have Diane Freiman, CEO of Performance Technology Solutions and former Program Development Director in PWN. I'm sure that it will be an hour of a great inspiration for all of us, and I'm very much looking forward in discovering the events and the ways, some anecdotes and facts that has been really key in the constructions of Sarah's professional and life successes, and not least her recent work. Before passing the baton to Diane and Sarah, I remind you that you can ask the questions using the Q&A button on your screen, which will be directed in the backstage of the webinar. At the end of the conversation, we will address the questions, and we will try our best to address as many questions as possible, depending on the time availability, of course. Well, I think now is really the time. I have the pleasure of passing the baton to you, Diane, and to you, Sarah, and a warm welcome to PWN. Thank you for this great opportunity. The digital stage is all yours now.
Thank you so much, Elena, Gina, and PWN for hosting this very important event. It's such a pleasure to be here together with my very good friend and colleague, Sarah Gay-Forden. What an exciting opportunity. Not everyone knows that Sarah and I met here at the PWN when it was called the PWA many years ago, at the time when she started writing the first edition of the book House of Gucci. So this, I would like you to know, is the very first of a series of conversations that we'll be having with important individuals, professionals from diverse backgrounds like Sarah. And it's called this series, which is put on by our company, PTS, Beyond Gender. So we hope that you'll enjoy this show and also future sessions that we'll be having. So just to say, PWN, PWA, what a fantastic start for a foreigner when I first came to Italy, coming from Singapore, working in Accenture, not knowing any Italian, not knowing anybody here really. So PWN was such a fundamental part of my beginning, my work here, beginning to meet meet clients, to meet professionals who were supporting me and my work, and in particular, meeting friends. And not everybody knows that Sarah gave me the fantastic opportunity to look at the galley version of the House of Gucci before it went to print. So Sarah, please share with the group about your experience with PWN, what it meant for you, and what you got out from it, what you got from the PWN.
Well, thank you, Diane, for that great introduction, and Elena and all of you at PWN. I'm so excited to be here with you because so much of the story also started here with you. And PWN for me was really the beginning of my network in Milan and Italy. And some of my dearest friends are still with me today, like you, Diane, from PWN. So for me, it was both a great way to meet people and to network, but it was also a great source of information. As a working woman, as a non-Italian working in Milan, the programs were always very interesting. I remember one in particular was with a psychologist who had been invited to talk about the challenges of bringing up children in a multilingual environment. And his message to everyone was, don't worry, your kids are fine. They can manage to learn and distinguish multiple languages. So you're not going to be stressing their brains. And that led us all to be much more relieved about the context that we were bringing up our children in.
Exactly. So it was a really supportive environment and continues to be so, which is why we've come to do this session here together with you all today. So what an incredible experience. I remember, this is your book, the original version, when it came out, how exciting has it been for you to see this renewed interest due to the new film that's come out with Lady Gaga. So tell us a little bit about what is that like, having gone through, writing the book and then seeing it on every billboard in America, everywhere that I go around Milan, everywhere in the world. What has that been like for you?
Well, I would say in a word, it's been absolutely surreal and kind of like a Cinderella experience. Not only seeing it on the billboards, but finding myself on the red carpets in London and New York and Los Angeles. I mean, this is something that, was just unfathomable a few years ago. When the book first came out, it did well. I was very satisfied with it. It sold over 50,000 copies. My publisher was pleased. We weren't on the New York Times bestseller list, but at the time there was something called the Extended New York Times bestseller list. And I think we were on number 15 or something. So it still was a successful book, and I felt, pleased with it. But I had always dreamed that it could become a movie. And I had written many of the scenes with the idea of the big screen in mind. That said, I never in a million years could have imagined that it would have become a movie at the scale of this one, with an accomplished director like Ridley Scott and a star-studded cast like Lady Gaga, Adam Driver, Jeremy Irons, Al Pacino. I mean, as these names started coming out, I just thought, oh my goodness, this is unbelievable.
And you actually sold the rights to the film from the time that it was published, the first time. And I think you waited through various levels of that, or stages. Did you want to share with the audience how that happened?
Actually, these projects do take a long time, I'm told. But in the early years, there was no film project with my book, because initially Martin Scorsese had said he wanted to make a Gucci movie, and he had bought the rights to an older book. So nothing happened for many years. And I would say that the option for this book happened probably a little more than 10 years ago. And then there were different screenplay writers attached to it. But it really hit the gas in 2018 when I actually met the screenplay writer Roberto Bentivegna, who's Italian. He grew up in Milano, went to the Sir James Henderson School for high school, and then moved with his parents to London. But his mother worked for Armani for something like 30 years. And so he grew up in the sort of Milano della Moda environment. And so he was really able to really perceive the breadth and the import of the story.
Excellent. Well, I think it's been an incredible story. Ever since we met and then we became friends, we had our children playing together here locally in Milan. Now, people may not know that no longer, while I'm still living here in Milano, Sara is not. She's living in Washington. She works for Bloomberg. I think it was mentioned at the opening. But it could be interesting, Sara, what do you think, to find out about the audience? What have they done so far? What do they know about the book? That way we can gear the questions that we ask, the things that you cover, a little bit more customized to their needs. Can we put on the polling question, please, Alina? You'll see a question coming up on your screen soon as the polling question is shared. We just want to get an idea from you. How many of you have actually read the book, seen the movie, both read the book and seen the movie, or maybe perhaps none of those, because then it will help us to understand better how we can meet the needs that you might have, just to give you more background about things, to make it more interesting. So this is our interactive session regarding our understanding about what your needs are as we go through. This is so important to get to know what's happening out there. So we see the numbers coming up. In a minute, we'll share. And I believe that we're coming to a close soon. So some people are still making up their minds, but it's very useful to see the answers to the questions, and then we can share those, I think, now. We've given people enough time to make up their minds, I think. Shall we share the evidence? Okay, so many of you some of you have read the book, seen the movie. A number of you both read the book and the movie, and many of you are getting curious about, through the knowledge about Sara, so meeting Sara, what it's all about. So this is one of the main reasons why we actually wanted to do the session, because I recognize the backstory. This is right, Sara, we talked about it, that this is the story behind the story of the House of Gucci. It's all about career, about how you got to the point where you decided to make some decisions regarding the entire writing of the book. So at this point, I think I'll share the slides. What do you think, Sara? Is that okay for you?
Sure, perfect.
Okay, I'll share those so that we can go through. You just let me know when I can advance them. You should be seeing that on their screen now. So this is the opening slide, but we've been introduced already. So Sara, writing the book, so many things related to the understanding of the story. Where would you like to begin?
Why don't you do the first bullet and we'll take it from there. Okay. I'm going to give you just a brief overview of the book. Also, since so many people haven't read it, this is a family saga spanning 3 generations of Gucci's. it intertwines the rise and the fall and the rise again of the Gucci brand. So I very much wanted to connect the business story with the family story.
Which is one of the things I always thought, Sara, when I read the book the first time, I thought, if this did become a film, how could it be as good as the book? Because you did such a fantastic job on intertwining a business case, a thriller, a murder mystery, and a romance, everything all together. It's just such an amazing book, really.
So packed in a lot.
Yes, absolutely.
So the book starts with the murder of Maurizio Gucci, who was the last family member to run the firm. And we later find out that it was ordered by his ex-wife, Patrizia Reggiani. It also covers the origins of the brand and the early days of the family and the family company, the iconic products that they developed, and then how Gucci went on to achieve new success after the family was no longer involved. And then it covers Patrizia's trial, which was a 5-month trial in Milan, and also the financial takeover battle between Bernard Arnault and Francois Pinault, who ended up ultimately controlling Gucci, and still that family group, Kering SA, still controls Gucci today.
Yes, it's a fascinating story. And I must say that realizing that it's on the nonfiction bestsellers list of the New York Times is the aspect that I find fascinating, because you did such incredible research, so detailed and everything. And you can really see that through the reading of the book, the detail that you provide and the information. So tell the group maybe a little bit about your background and how you came to write the book.
So I considered myself a business reporter, and I came to Milan because I already knew Italian. I had done a master's program through the Johns Hopkins program in Bologna. But Milan was clearly Italy's business and financial center. And I was reporting initially for Dow Jones, and then I moved over to Women's Wear Daily, which was the sort of paper of record for the fashion industry. And it just happened. I didn't start out thinking I was going to be writing about the fashion business, but it became clear to me in my early years in Milan, I moved to Milan in 1988, that the fashion industry was quickly becoming the big booming business in Milan. And I also thought people would be really interested to read about these personalities and the creativity and the strategies of, it was names like Armani and Versace, and at the time, Ferré, Krizia, Missoni. Gucci was actually not a frontier name in those early years. So I ended up covering the fashion industry for nearly 20 years. But as I was saying, as a beat reporter, I think many journalists would agree that you kind of get a hankering to dig your teeth into something that's deeper and bigger, and you want to write a book. And for years, I had written in my New Year's intentions, I want to write a book, I want to write a book. But I knew that I wasn't a novelist, although I love a good novel, but I thought I really deal in facts, not fiction. And what am I going to write about?
Yeah. And I remember when we were at dinner that night, September, when you came in for the Gucci event that we went to together, and we were talking about it, and that fascinating backstory you told me while you were in the US and sort of going to the library and having a look at what was then an automated version of what we used to use for searching documentation in the library. And what came up?
So this is where, you have how a light bulb moment can kind of change the course of your life. And I walked into this library. The new computer was in the research department. I said, well, let's give it a spin. I typed in Gucci because it was very much on my mind, because I'd been covering, day in, day out, Maurizio's loss of the company, and then his murder, and then Patrizia's arrest. And so I type in Gucci, and of the 10 blue links that came out, 8 of them I had written. And I thought, oh my goodness, that's the book. And I began to see there was a narrative arc to it, the rise and the fall and the rise again, because at that point, Tom Ford and Domenico De Sole were running Gucci. Tom Ford's fashions were blowing it out of the park. The company had staged the most successful IPO that they could have imagined, and so on. It became, it really was like an arc to the story.
Yes, absolutely. So you mentioned about your work as a bureau chief and the business writer for Women's Wear Daily, the most important magazine in the trade. And tell us about what it took to research the book.
So I started out just by getting confirmations from the people that I was closest to, that I knew from covering the business, people like Don Mello, who helped Maurizio turn Gucci around, Tom Ford, Domenico De Sole, people who had worked with them, to ask them if they would help me. And that was even before I had even written a proposal. And then as I went on, I really interviewed people in the company, people who were close to the family, people in the fashion industry, buyers, retailers. I went as deep and wide as I could.
Yeah, and you can see it in the book. You talk about literary journalism. What does that mean for you? And what did that do for the behind scenes and the preparation for writing the book?
So this was a term that was in vogue when I was in college, actually. And I was very much inspired by books, big business books like Barbarians at the Gate by Brian Burrow or Den of Thieves. And so I was really aiming to kind of hit that kind of a genre. And literary journalism just means to use the techniques of fiction to write nonfiction. And so I wanted to write this true story as though it were a novel, and just to pull the reader in. And that's one reason why I needed to interview so many people, because I needed, in order to set the scenes and to say, what color the sky was, or what the people in the room were wearing, or what they looked like, you have to have a lot of detail. And so I gathered a lot of details through all those interviews.
How long did that take?
So the whole project all in took 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
The actual research and writing took about 18 months. And then the last 6 months was really passing the manuscript back and forth and copy editing and polishing and refining.
Very interesting. And you wanted to mention about Maurizio Gucci?
I think it was important because, he was often criticized in many ways for not being successful as a businessman. He was killed, so he's not around to tell his story. But I felt that it was very important to underline and sort of give his legacy recognition, because he was the one who had the vision to take Gucci back up to the top of the luxury goods market, to restore it to the glamour that it had under his father and his grandfather. And even though he ultimately wasn't successful in doing that, he did also the very difficult groundwork, cleaning up the market, laying the foundation for the people who came after him and made it a success.
Absolutely. So I think there's a bit of background in terms of the dynasty of the Guccis that you wanted to share with the group so they could better understand the history of the family.
Yeah, I put this family tree in the beginning of the book because I think it's important, as you go through, people, I realize, get confused about who's who. And also to show, in the family, sort of the history of family companies, there's a saying that the first generation creates, the second generation expands, and the third generation destroys. And this was almost true in the Gucci story. I mean, Guccio Gucci was the founder and the creator. Aldo was really the second generation, the one who had the vision to expand. He opened up stores in New York, in LA, in Japan. He was the marketer, sublime marketer. He's the one who created the whole idea that the Guccis were saddlers to nobility, which was completely false, but it was very effective. And then the troubles that came through the third generation, the family feuds, the fights with the cousins, and ultimately Maurizio's, losing the company. But it didn't get destroyed. They picked it up, they made it great again, and we still have, a very, very successful Gucci brand today.
Absolutely. And perhaps, as you mentioned about the family feuds, which I think that everybody finds very interesting and which come out so clearly through the book and in the film.
So this is really a case of facts being stranger than fiction. And there were so many twists and turns that you just, if I had made this up, you wouldn't have believed it. You said, oh, that's just over the top. But just some examples here. So Rodolfo disinherits Maurizio when he marries Patrizia because he saw her as a gold digger and didn't think she was the right woman for him. Paolo was Maurizio's cousin and Aldo's son. constantly trying to have recognition for his creative, contributions to the brand, ended up in frustration, sending his father to jail for tax evasion. He turned in Maurizio for forging his father's signature on the company's shares to avoid the inheritance tax. And he also sent the financial police after Maurizio. This is one of my favorite scenes, both in the book and in the movie, where Maurizio's loyal driver, Luigi, tips him off that the Guardia di Finanza is coming, and he runs down to the basement, he gets his Kawasaki out, and he rides like a bat out of hell for 3.5 hours or 2.5 hours to St. Moritz, where he happens to have a chalet that he inherited from his father. And what isn't explained in the movie, but you all know, and it says it in the book, Switzerland doesn't have an extradition treaty with Italy. So he was actually safe there from any arrests or any charges while he stayed there. And he ran the company for about a year from Switzerland.
Yes, stranger than fiction, certainly.
And at one point, there were more than 20 family lawsuits raging on both sides of the Atlantic, to the point that at one point a judge in one of the cases in the States looked out over her courtroom, and she said that she actually knew that more than 70% of the cost of every Gucci wallet was going to pay lawyers' fees.
And what about the emotional tension of throwing all of the various bags and things around the room?
So there's an incredible scene that when I reread it, it still sort of gave me pause when Paolo is fighting with Aldo, and Aldo gets angry at Paolo, and he picks up this huge heavy crystal ashtray that's on his desk, and he throws it across the room, and it smashes against the wall into 1,000 pieces. And another moment where the guard is coming to unlock the gates of the factory in Scandicci outside Florence, and he sees the windows are open and all these bags are in the grass, and he thinks, oh my God, there's been a break-in, a burglary, and he goes upstairs, and what he realizes is that there had been a family product meeting the night before. It was warm, the windows were open, they had thrown handbags at each other, and some of them had sailed through the open windows and ended up in the grass below.
What a drama. Yes, an incredible drama that's fascinating to see in the movie, but certainly incredible to read about in the book. Dawn Mello was a person you mentioned already, Sara, when you were doing your research, and how important she was and pivotal to the entire Gucci area. And since we're talking with the PWN regarding the impact that she had and how she was chosen by Maurizio to do this turnaround, can you tell us a little bit more about that?
It's really nice to remember her. Unfortunately, we lost her last year, and she was really an icon in retailing and one of the most successful women in American retail. And she had gotten to the point where she turned around Bergdorf Goodman, which had kind of become a sort of fusty, dusty, old school retailer, and she made it bright and shiny and chic again. And one of the ways she did that actually was by buying the Italian brands. And so she tells this story, which is also in the book, that at the time that she was trying to turn around Bergdorf's, the French designers already had exclusives with the major American department stores, and they wouldn't sell to her. And plus, it's only one store, even though it's part of the Neiman Marcus group. And one of the ways she turned it around was to start buying these budding Italian designers. And she, put Armani in there and Prada and Jill Sander, who was manufactured in Italy. So she really got to know and love the Italian brands. But she had no interest in working.
Sorry, to interrupt you. Just a quick question. So would you say that Dawn was actually facilitating the import and export of goods from Italy to the recognition of the made in Italy?
Absolutely. She was one of the first. Yeah, she was one of the first. And she actually was very happy in her job at Bergdorf. She had the big corner office overlooking Central Park. She was, developing new designers, and she discovered Michael Kors, for example, and many others.
What a talent.
But she had one meeting with Maurizio, and she was ignoring his phone calls. And finally, a friend called and said, Dawn, why aren't you returning Maurizio's phone calls? She's like, oh, I don't have time, I'm busy. And he said, please meet with Maurizio. Well, they had one meeting, and Maurizio was so charming and enthusiastic and charismatic that he completely turned her head around, and she walked out of that meeting knowing that her life was going to be forever changed. And so this is important to show how Maurizio had a vision, and she was part of that vision, and how she then got the attention of the American press, the American buyers. She hired designers like Richard Lambertson and Tom Ford, who obviously went on to make Gucci a blockbuster. So I thought it was important to just
Absolutely. And I think as a woman
did.
being recognized by Gucci as having this incredible talent and ability, and putting that to good use, that had an incredible impact, because as you said, Tom Ford, you know, the story that you explained to me, can you maybe help the group to understand better how initially there were only bags that were done by Gucci, and then it was stretched to, and shoes, I believe, right? And then
Right.
he moved it to also other genres, other retail items.
Well, she was having trouble getting the American buyers and journalists to their presentations. They were doing still presentations, not fashion shows. And so the first thing she did was she made the Gucci loafer in a rainbow of colors and suede and sent them to all the big fashion editors. And they started coming. But then she realized they needed to get into the fashion spectrum. And in order to do that, they needed clothing, because you can't just put a handbag and a pair of shoes on the runway. The woman has to be wearing something. And so the clothing was also part of the, you know, the marketing strategy.
Absolutely. So they must really thank Dawn Mello, may she rest in peace, for all she did for the organization and for Italian Made in Italy. Right, recognized by some of the Gucci icons that you wanted to share with the group.
Yeah, and in the book, you know, I go into a lot of detail to the history behind these icons, but I think the most recognizable is the bamboo handled bag. In the case, you have one of the original versions, which is dated back to probably the 50s, 40s, 50s. And then on the other side, you have the new model by Alessandro Michele. And I'll just explain that electric yellow strap. I just found this out, actually. That goes on the bamboo handle in the box when you buy the bag and you take it home. And that's supposed to be kept on to keep the handle in shape, but it was never considered a fashion element. And Alessandro liked it so much that he decided to leave it on and make it a fun color, poppy color. So he kind of incorporated, you know, again, the history.
The current creative director, Alessandro Michele. Yes. Yeah. What a very fresh idea on his part. Oh, sorry, there was this one last one that
everyone knows the Jackie bag, which was a real evolution from the bamboo handle bag, because it's soft and it fits under your shoulder and it's comfortable, and it's roomy. So it's kind of like the perfect bag. And of course, it was made famous because Jackie O used to carry it.
Exactly. So Jackie Onassis was such an important icon, such an important influence on society. Kennedy's former wife. So amazing stories. So thanks for sharing so much about the aspects of the book. I think that for those who are in the audience that didn't know much about it, you might have piqued their interest at this point, certainly. And I think turning now to focusing on the story behind the story, the career, your career. You know, every person in their career certainly has different turning points. I remember for myself, when I first decided to move to Italy from working with Accenture in the Pacific Basin, coming to Italy, going out on my own, first as a freelance, and then deciding that was one turning point. Huge decision, coming to a country where I knew nothing about the language and the culture, having to start from scratch. And then another turning point, deciding to create my company, Performance Technology Solutions. What about you? Where would you see your different career turning points have been? And how did you deal with each one of those? And what could you share with the audience so that they can learn from your wisdom?
Well, certainly being a reporter in Italy was a dream come true for me. I had always wanted to be a foreign correspondent. I loved Italy. I loved Italian. For me, the language was actually fundamental because I was really able to get the story, because I could interview people and understand the answers. And so that was just really a dream come true. And then as I went along, I talked about this sort of desire to write a book. For me, again, that was kind of a big swing. I felt very intimidated when I started out. I felt like I was, little Sarah in Milano, trying to eke my way along. And there were a lot of, big male journalists, that I knew, that I, was colleagues with, who were also writing books or had written books. And I felt very intimidated by sort of trying to take this shot. And that was actually exaggerated one day when I was, reporting for the book. I was in Milan in the courthouse, in the courtroom covering the trial, and my cell phone rings. And we had those big brick Motorola phones back then. And I leave the courtroom, and I'm out in that big foyer. And it's Severin Wunderman, who was the watch manufacturer for Gucci. And he had a very successful license. It was the most lucrative of all the licenses at times. And I had just sent him a fax asking if he would give me an interview. And I get this phone call, and it's, "Miss Forden, this is Severin Wunderman." He said, "I knew Aldo Gucci. I am the watch manufacturer. I am going to write the book because I know the story, and it's a personal story. Like, I don't have to ask people to be interviewed. It's my story. So I'm going to write the Gucci story, and your book is going to be nothing. And I'm a very wealthy man, and I'm going to also finance the movie." So basically, he was just like telling me, give it up.
Oh
So
my
at that
goodness.
point, I was shaking. I was shaking in my boots, and I was like, oh my God, what can I do? He's going to do the book. And everybody knows, like, if there's two books that come out on a topic, it's always best to be the first one, because the second one is never going to, get any attention. So I calmed myself down, and I went back to my office, and I decided there was nothing I could do. I had already taken leave. I was already well into reporting on the book. I was just going to have to be like the tortoise and the hare, and I was the tortoise, and I just had to keep plugging, which is what I did. And months went by, and I got to the end, and Severin still hadn't published a book or financed a movie. And I had interviewed people all around the watch license, because it was an important part of the business story. And I had distilled that story into about 3 pages. And I slipped those pages into my fax machine, because in those days we faxed everybody. And I said, "Dear Mr. Wunderman, I know you didn't want to be interviewed for this book, but I have recreated the story as best I could without you. And I would really appreciate if you would read these pages and tell me if there's anything wrong, or if there's anything you think should be clarified." I just slipped the last page into the fax, and the phone rings. "Ms. Forden, this is Severin Wunderman. Says, you have 2 choices. Next weekend at my chateau in the south of France, or the weekend after in my townhouse in London. And he was going to give you the interview."
Was he hitting on you? Sorry to put it this way.
No. So I said, I had a 3-year-old at that point. I was like, I had childcare issues. I said, I can't do the weekend in the south of France, but I would love to come and interview you at your townhouse in London. And I did. And it was a phenomenal interview. The man was fascinating. His life could have been a book. He's, orphan from Eastern Europe, self-made man, incredibly successful businessman. He went on to found another successful watch company after the Gucci license. So I got the story finally.
Fantastic. Yeah. That just shows your finesse and your ability to work with people and to make relations work. And what I get from your story is the transparency that you had, and the showing respect to him about his knowledge, and that won him over, I believe.
In terms of how we pursue our careers and try to go after our dreams, it also meant not being dissuaded.
Right.
And 2, not being discouraged by a no. Sometimes you have to come back in a different way. No isn't necessarily always final.
Absolutely. No, that's a fantastic story. And you mentioned during that, when you had the request about Giulia, your daughter, who I know and love absolutely. She's an amazing woman. What challenges? I mean, we're all always battling with this work-life balance, being a career woman and also being a mother. How did you find it raising Julia, and how did you manage that whole work-life balance issue that everybody wants to know about?
Great question. And, you know, I think now that I am managing young women who are having families, I'm hoping and I feel like there's much more acceptance of professional women who are mothers, and also men too. I think we're still not maybe in an ideal situation, but I think it's changing. I remember in my case when first of all, I waited a long time to have children because I felt like it would hurt my career. And second of all, I felt a lot of guilt and just this kind of whiplash between like, who was I as a professional and who was I as a mother? And I had a hard time integrating those things. And I think all of those things made it harder for us. And I'm hoping that it's easier for young women today. But I do want to share a brief story that I think may help people think about this differently. And that is, first of all, it's also good for our children to see us as professionals and to see us both as family, you know, parents and family members, but also as professionals. So it's not all negative. We tend to think, I think in our generation, that it was all negative, or we were away. And second of all, there's one birthday in particular that Julia still remembers as one of her best birthdays ever. And at that point, I was working for Bloomberg and we had shifts, and I was on the 6 a.m. shift, and I had completely forgotten to take the day off for her birthday, and I was racked with guilt. And so I went down to the Disney store, which had recently opened in Milan, and I bought a bunch of little fun things like the dishes and the cups and the plates and the little shoes. And then I bought like the big, like the princess dress, and I don't remember which princess it was. And I wrapped them all up, and I cut out little like dancing shoe cutouts. And I set up this little trail of shoes and gifts from her bedroom into the kitchen where she would come out and eat her breakfast with the nanny who was there because I was in the office. And I felt terrible. I felt terrible, and I felt terrible the whole day. But years later, so it wasn't immediate gratification. I mean, she liked the gifts. Years later, as like a young woman, Julia told me that for her in her mind, and even after all the birthdays where I had hired magicians and storytellers and, you know, machines that blew up balloons, like that was the birthday that she remembered more than the others.
You see, you never know what's going to work, but you were so thoughtful for her, and you made it fun and interesting. And so that meant a lot to her. I know, having raised two girls myself, who I'm very proud of, that how difficult that work-life balance and that feeling of guilt, never, you know, thinking about home when you're at work and thinking about work when you're at home, sort of thing. That battle is really important to learn how to grapple with, and to learn how to. But I saw you managing that very well. You were very well organized, always.
Not
and
always. You just made a scene flash into my mind where I'm in my bedroom and I have a desk there, and I'm home. So I'm home, but an editor calls, and Julia wanted me in that moment. And I literally like slammed the door on her and put my back against it because she's like pounding on it. And I'm on the phone trying to talk to my editor. So there were messy moments.
Oh, well, who doesn't have them? They wouldn't be reality if we didn't, would it? So fascinating. I mean, we can see all the personal characteristics that you have, that determination, that passion for your work, but the love for your daughter, and that ability to balance those things. And I've seen through also your relationship today how close you are together. So that, I think, speaks mounds in relationship for today. So that I think tells us everything. Did you have any periods of doubt during your career? Did you like to talk about how you, what happened for you and how you overcame those? That might help people to understand better how they can cope with it themselves.
Yeah, I mean, I think the examples I gave of sort of feeling like my male colleagues were sort of better equipped to write books and tell big stories, and the doubts when Wunderman, you know, was bullying me. I mean, that was really bullying. And
you turn that one around.
At a certain point, you know, the whole journalism field really took a dive. And so I also had doubts about whether or not to stay as a journalist or try to look for another line of work. And I think in all of those cases, it's really just important to be able to drop down and sort of feel the you know, your convictions and follow your heart and what you think is the right thing to do.
Excellent. And you can see how following your heart has brought incredible success and recognition. And we're so proud of you and for all that your accomplishments. And it's been fantastic having this chat. And I know that there's a lot of questions from the audience. And I'd like to therefore invite Elena to come with us. She's been following the chat and help us to understand what the other questions might be, as we did open it to the group.
Yeah, thank you very much, Diane, and thank you, Sarah. Very, very inspiring. We have very many questions, in fact. So I'm trying to organize them. And the very first one would be actually on what really, on the book, okay, on what really triggers and triggered the interest in the Gucci house vis-a-vis maybe other brands and other big families in Italy. And you mentioned a few, but you were really struck, as you actually told us, by the Gucci. So there was some kind of special thing that you picked your interest and really gave you the, let's say, the go for starting to write the book.
I mean, I did, as I said, it was sparked by Maurizio and this sort of quest that he was on to turn Gucci around. But I also think it was just the extraordinary nature of the story and the family battles. And, you know, again, we had a situation where, I mean, many families, all families have dysfunction, and I'm sure many families have these battles, but many of them kind of stay behind the scenes. Because the Gucci family was also very litigious, a lot of this conflict spilled out into the public. And so it was accessible and we could know about it and I could write about it from a factual basis. And in fact, a lot of detail and documents actually came out in the trial. But beyond that and sort of the you know, tools of the trade, I also came to realize as I was interviewing people who'd worked with the company and worked with the family, I mean, and over decades, so not just the more recent cycle, everybody who had worked with this company felt touched by it in a deep way and felt changed by it in a deep way. And so there was something also really inexplicable that I didn't find with other companies as much. So, you know, yes, Armani, Versace, I mean, they're amazing companies, they've had amazing success, but there was something unexplainable about Gucci, I think, that stood a little bit apart.
Okay, really, really fascinating, Sarah. Thank you very much. And actually, still on the book, and given the fact that we are in PWN, so we are talking about, you know, women in their life and in their profession, we have a question which is relating to your idea, having researched a lot to write your book, about the role of women in the Gucci family. Did you have any idea in, you know, gathering all the information and making all this research? What is your idea of that?
Well, it was very clear that it was a very patriarchal family and company. And I write quite a bit about how tough the fathers were on their children and both their sons, but in particular on in Guccio's case on his daughter, Grimalda, who was actually the person who was in the store in Florence, behind the counter at the cash register. And when his will was revealed after his death, to her shock and dismay, he had written her out of his will because he didn't see her as a woman having, you know, the future stake in the company. And she was horrified by this and she protested with her brothers. But in the end, you know, they took their shares in the company, but they didn't try to bring her in. And Guccio's explanation was that she got the house and other family property and assets. So she should have been happy with that. But she actually really wanted to be, she was in the store every day and she wanted to be involved in the business. So you know, I think it was a bad omen. And, you know, Gucci to this day has not really been run by women. So that, for whatever reason, I mean, actually there was the creative director for many years was Frida Giannini, but other than that, it hasn't really been associated with women.
Yeah. Actually, I'm following you. In fact, it seems that, it belongs a little bit on the sort of a past style of management in a way, where, men were actually really running the business. And actually on that, we have another question, which is related more to the role of Domenico in the family, and the fact that it seems that as you shared with the audience, it seems that in Italy there is it's valid what you shared for the Gucci family, that the very first one is building the first generation, the second one is expanding, and the third one is destroying, in fact. What is, in your view, having done so in-depth research, the role of Domenico in keeping alive the business at one point in the history of the family?
Great question. And really throughout his career, he was absolutely dedicated to the company and bringing the company to the next level and protecting the family as well. I mean, he was the one who first told Aldo, like, Aldo, you can't mess around with the IRS. It's different in Italy, where people find ways to not pay taxes, but in the US, they will nail you and they will send you to jail. And that is exactly what happened. And Aldo said, oh, don't tell me. It's my company. And then when there was the standoff between Gucci America and Gucci Italy and the conflicts with Maurizio, ultimately, even though Rodolfo had asked him to kind of protect Maurizio and help Maurizio, at the end, in Domenico's assessment, Maurizio was actually one of the biggest risks to the future of the company. And it was his vote that sent the control to Investcorp. And so he's been also called a traitor. So you could see him as the traitor to the family. But in his, acknowledging of that, he said, I had to do what I felt was best for the company. So he always saw him as a servant to the company. And then he ended up becoming the CEO. And it wasn't, it wasn't sort of something that was taken for granted. They did a worldwide search for a CEO because Investcorp at the time didn't see De Sole as CEO material. And they came back and concluded that he was actually the best person to lead the company forward. And so he became the luxury CEO who led Gucci then into a new generation of growth with the multi-brand strategy. So he was a key source because he was the person who had the biggest arc of experience with the story. And he was also in these family board meetings, many of them that I write about, and knew exactly who was sitting where and what was said. And the meeting where there's the scuffle with Paolo over the tape recorder, and he gets a cut and he runs out and Via Tornabuoni bleeding and saying, call my lawyer. Domenico's there. So he was also an incredible source.
Okay.
And I will say, for those of you who see the movie, he's very present in the on the frame, but he's very kind of a surface figure. You don't get all the passion that you will see if you read the book about what he brought to the family and to the company.
Yeah. So this is somehow a great suggestion to read the book first of all, and then eventually to see the movie. It's always like this, isn't it? I mean, you really get into the emotional imagery of the story by reading the book in a way. Thank you very much, Sarah. I have a couple of more questions. I think we have some minutes left. So if you agree, I will shift on more on your professional life, in fact, because we have many questions about how do you cope really with writing a book, which is a very intensive journey, and also are you working at the same time? How you are managing all of this? I mean, how you came up in surviving in this beautiful journey that you just completed?
Well, thank you. Well, it's very time consuming, and there are many journalists who work full time and write books. And I think that's extraordinary. I actually took a leave of absence. But what I found was that I was really busy because I was researching the past. I was re-reporting the earlier book that was based on interviews with Paolo. And then while I was writing, two things happened that I had to follow kind of in real time. One was the takeover battle between Arnaud and Pinault started. So, and I was kind of keeping very much up to date on that as it unfolded. And then the trial started. This was in May of '98, and that lasted for 5 months. And they were meeting 3 days a week, and I was in the courtroom just about every day because I didn't want to miss anything, a glance, a phrase. I wanted to really capture the drama of the court scene. So all of that was kind of going on at once. So I was interviewing people, following the takeover battle, reporting the history, and covering the trial. So it was a lot to juggle.
Okay, very interesting. Thank you for that. That is very inspiring, I think, for all our audience as well. Actually, we have time for at least one last questions, which is about dream and making dreams come true, Sarah. It seems that, as you mentioned in the very beginning of our conversation, you actually really dreamt about something. And what would be an advice that you may give to our audience to actually, fulfill their dream and make them come true in their life, professional or overall in life?
Great question. I think the most important thing, and sometimes the difficult thing, is to have a dream. And I spent a lot of time not really knowing what I wanted to do. I was not really connected to what I aspired to. And so I think the first step is to work on yourself and sort of try to, they're there. You just have to kind of uncover them and access them. So now, and as an older person, I'm very interested in meditation, in yoga, in breath, in breathing, in taking time to play. I think all of these things that happen with the whatever, I can't remember if it's the right or the left side of the brain. I mean, we're so good at being type A's and so, used to being organized, and I'm a list maker and I'm disciplined, but I think it's really important to nurture that creative side. So you identify your dreams, and then once you've identified them, you internalize them, then you can try to manifest them by nurturing them in different ways. And so whether it's a mantra, whether it's making little steps towards your goals, all of those things can help make your dreams come true.
Okay, very interesting and full of learnings and inspirations. Actually, as a very, very final one, Sarah, before we actually say goodbye to our audience, actually, I can tell you that there is a lot of appreciation that is coming in about your book. And so actually, the part of the audience that has already read it is already questioning and talking and asking you about what's next. So what do you say?
Great question. Well, I definitely want to write another book. I'm doing research. I'm nurturing that dream, that process. So I have nothing to announce. But follow me on Instagram. I think the links
we
are
put it in the chat now. The chat is now on Instagram, link for you, and also your website. And I've included also some information regarding myself and a free ebook for those who are interested in diversity, equity, and inclusion. So that's at the end of it. So if you want to click on those or take and cut and paste them into your desktop, there you go. And
I just wanted to share a fun thing about the Instagram. I've had a fun time creating a little story behind the story, which is the key locations, key scenes in the book. And I'm sort of posting them in my Instagram with excerpts from the book so you can see the place where those things happened.
Okay, that's great. So thank you very much. I think we are towards the end of our conversation. I really thank you both, Sarah and Jan. Really, thank you for being with us in PWN Milan. I think it was very inspiring for all our audience. And actually, as we speak and as we close, also the final survey is also popping up for everybody to give us feedback on the session overall. We are very, very fond of improving all the times what we're doing for you. We are here for you, actually, for developing the potentialities and doing what we do. So we really thank Sarah and Diane for being with us, and we wait everybody to the next event, which is going to be on February the 9th in presence. And with all this, we all say goodbye and thank you so much for being with us.